Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Virtual Learning Summit presented by Beyond Basics, the John Corcoran Foundation, and Evidence-Based Literacy Instruction. Appreciate you being here, taking the time with us. As Gabby said, my name is Liana Loewus, and I'm the managing editor for education at US News and World Report, and I'll be moderating today. As we all know, there are multiple national and international crises going on right now in the world. But today we're going to be focused on what many are calling a crisis related to literacy right here in our own country. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart as I began my career as a teacher and a reading specialist before I became a journalist. So according to data from the Department of Education, about 1 in 5 US adults, so that's about 43 million people aged 16 to 65, have low literacy skills. And for many of those people, that means they're unable to read or understand short sentences or complete simple forms. If we look at our younger population, in 2019, just 34% of fourth graders in public schools performed at or above the proficient level in reading on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is a federal assessment, also known as the nation's report card. The percentage of eighth graders that year who performed proficient or above, at or above proficient, was just 32%. And that was before the pandemic robbed many students of a year of in-person learning. In today's panel, we're going to focus on how we got here and ultimately what steps we as educators, parents, researchers, policymakers, advocates, community leaders, we all can take to start improving literacy rates. So I'm here today with 3 esteemed panelists. We have Pamela Good, who is the co-founder and CEO of Beyond Basics, a nonprofit with 20 years of experience offering structured, intensive literacy interventions, primarily in partnerships with K-12 schools and sometimes with adults. We have Nick Nanton, who is an Emmy award-winning director who specializes in bringing the element of human connection to every viewer, no matter the subject. His recent documentary project, The Truth About Reading, has given him unique insight into illiteracy nationwide. And Ken Williams is a husband, father, nationally recognized trainer, speaker, coach, and consultant in leadership and school culture. He's also a former principal and teacher. Ken is skilled in joining the why of the work to the how of the work. And his new book, which I believe is released today, is called Ruthless Equity. Yeah. So before we get started with the panel, we have a short clip from Nick's upcoming film, The Truth About Reading. So let's go ahead and get that clip rolling. Take your time going down and just read me those words from the top to the bottom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're right.
Bought, interested, knowledge, peace, euphemism. Unless I really dig deep into this one, I don't have an answer.
Really hard. The answer is really hard.
This seems like elementary school. I feel embarrassed.
All across this country, kids are not being taught how to read the words. This is a misunderstanding that has to be exposed, that the system works for most kids and it's those few that fail. And that's a lie.
Look it up, it's everywhere. You will see over 60% of children are not reading at grade level proficiency.
I was definitely hiding, keeping this secret to myself because I was embarrassed. More than anything, I felt like a fraud.
I remember I was always nervous to get called on. The teacher would realize who would read the best. They would eventually just continue calling on that person to read. I would always struggle.
17 years I taught public high school in California. I could not read, write, or spell.
We've got large challenges here in America. No greater challenge than to make sure that every child, not just a few children, every child receive a first-class education.
The No Child Left Behind law. No Child Left Behind had us focused on standardized tests, which start in 3rd grade. So everyone was laser focused on 3rd grade and beyond, and kind of what was happening K1, 2, they lost track of it. There's a notion, a belief that kids start to read because they've matured to the point where they're ready to start reading. Not correct.
The reading wars, should we be teaching kids phonics or what was termed whole language? The theory was they just need to memorize a whole bunch of words and that's what good readers do.
They say, no, it's all about comprehension. But I say, well, if they can't read the words, how can they comprehend? It's almost like suggesting that a child who was listening to Mozart all their life, you put them in front of a piano and you say, now you play Mozart.
The research is unequivocally solid that phonemic awareness is absolutely critical to reach your highest potential reading and in spelling. It's something that we use all the time when we're reading and we don't even know it.
It's a lot more than phonics. It's the mechanics of how to read.
My daughter's kindergarten year, I was in the classroom. I saw their teaching instruction. She had directed them away from the words. Look at the picture. Do you think it's a bear or is it a fox? It stopped me in my tracks because it was everything that I had taught myself to do to look like a good reader.
And so you have to ask yourself, if we have this data, if we have this knowledge, why does there have to be a war? When we know that the outcome of us having that debate is literally the trajectory of someone's life.
If people only knew, it just totally tears you apart.
This entire issue requires a grassroots movement of parents and educators who are angry and who say enough is enough.
We're not dumb. We're not dumb. It's not too late.
Thank you so much for that. And we're going to jump into our panel discussion in a moment, but I did notice there are a few participants here who are actually featured in the film, so that's pretty exciting. But I wanted to let everyone know that you will have a chance to ask questions, so start thinking now about things that you want to ask people on the panel, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I'm hoping, Nick, you can actually kick us off in our discussion. We saw that great clip, great trailer from your film, so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you learned while you were interviewing people for the film, and particularly those adults you talked to who aren't able to read. I'm just wondering what kind of an impact does it have on a person to move into adulthood without those basic skills?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I apologize for looking like I'm in a hostage situation. I'm in a hotel room and this is the best lighting I can get traveling on another shoot. But, you know, I mean, it was mind-blowing to me. I actually was able to interview a woman who I met, who I was the third person in the world who she told that she couldn't read. And she told me on camera. And I don't know if I'm be able to use it or not because it's still such a raw story for her. But what blew my mind over and over again, just because it's something I had never really dealt with, was the amount of pain and sadness these adults had who had struggled with reading their whole life. It had become like John Corcoran, a life of lying, deceit, stealing. I mean, anything to just hide this one thing. Or it takes many shapes and sizes. This woman said she had to convince her high school teachers to let her do some of her final exams by speaking. And I mean, she became like the best salesperson ever to like she hounded them till they said yes, because it was really her only way of coping. So pretty mind blowing, but there's an immense amount of pain and hurt, and every single one of them cries deep, dark tears when you start talking to them about this stuff. And you can tell it's been a life of hurt. It was profound how deeply it had hurt them.
Makes a lot of sense. And I just, the other panelists, if you want to jump in, just speak up. But Pam, so you co-founded and run a nonprofit devoted to improving reading proficiency in Detroit schools and for the larger community. Talk a little bit about why this is so important to you personally and just what you've learned over the years about the challenges facing schools in the community.
Well, I think all of us at Beyond Basics recognize that without being able to read, you cannot really plug into society. And the fact of the numbers that we see. So we work in school districts, and I know in the film you touched on standardized assessments. And I think what happened when the nation went to standardized assessments and focusing on grades, they lost that individual diagnostic. And so for us, we get to see that this high school student's reading at third grade level. We get to see that a third grader's reading at 0, so we see these kids and we know that if they don't get an intensive intervention, they will be graduated not reading. And so that's what drives our team to keep going, to find solutions, to work so hard, is that we see kids that are ill prepared to function. And if you graduate not being able to read, there really isn't a place that you're going to get that intensive intervention. It really, we're killing the futures of our children by not letting them leave at least literate. That would be more powerful than if they had 12 years of education and no reading skills. So that's what keeps us going.
Wow, that's great. So Ken, you as I said, you were a teacher and a principal, and I'm wondering if you can think about that time a little bit, and what are some of your takeaways around literacy from your time in schools, and how that relates to what you do now. What is it that you learned about what students need to succeed, and what are they not getting?
Sure. I mean, I'd be echoing so much of what's been said already. I mean, it's so evident and obvious how literacy is, so important. It's vital. It's critical. When I think about my time as a teacher and a school leader, or better yet, how I got to this place. I've been asked several times, like, how do you end up on a literacy panel, a summit? And I'll tell you, my route here was through an educator, Rebecca Miles. She's out of Michigan. We connected. We did a little bit of work together. And what I discovered really, really quickly is that she embodies what I looked for in teachers, and I don't just see enough of it. I think it's a crisis of confidence. She has what I call indomitable spirit. I'm not afraid to admit, full transparency, I'm not aware of these reading wars. I don't know what they're about. All I know is that when I talk to Rebecca, she doesn't hope all kids can learn. Not only is she convicted about it, but she believes she can teach anyone. And that's the kind of person I want to be around. I call it indomitable spirit. If they don't have the answer, they will find the answer. So convicted in, and have the results to back it up. That's the side I'm on. And so I want to align with people like that who are willing to marshal the supports, the resources, collaborate with others, switch gears when they need to switch gears. But literacy is such a crisis in our country that we need people who are absolutely convicted about making it happen, not hoping it happens, and making it happen in the face of adversity and challenges. Like that's the biggest issue out there now to me is we know this kid needs to read, but then we start doing the subtraction based on where he's from, what he looks like, who his parents are, the neighborhood, the zip code. And for people like Rebecca, and then, as a result, all the folks on this panel that I've met since then, those are all context issues. Those aren't excuses for why the kid can't learn. Those are contexts to work around, to finesse, to work under, to work over, to work. I'm here because I had a handful of teachers, just a handful, who saw past my circumstances, and I am because they are. So that's what I think about. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Pam, your group made a big transition from one way of teaching reading to another over the years. You've been doing this a while. Tell us about that change, why you made that change, and what the results have been.
So I think we've made a couple significant changes. I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but when we first stumbled on this problem, we were pretty much academic enrichment in the schools, and we realized that kids couldn't read. And it took 4 years just going deeper, figuring out assessment's important and an intensive one-on-one is critical. phonics-based, science of reading, lots of ways to label it. But we perfected it in K-8. And then in about 2011, we went into the high schools, and we were aware of how many kids need it, right? In our communities, 85, 90% of the kids need this intensive one-on-one. But with that, working with these various groups and working with kids who were the farthest behind, and that was our goal, that child who was farthest behind, that we would be able to help them. And so over the years, we do get consistent grade level movement, getting people literate in an average of 6 to 10 weeks. But what we did just a couple of years ago with the pandemic is we converted to an online platform, which is phenomenal. I mean, it does give us access to kids in school, but this problem is often talked about in an educational format because we've expected that in our schools, kids would learn to read, they would graduate, they'd plug into society. But we really haven't been doing that in our schools for decades. And so what we have are adults everywhere that miss the boat. And with the online platform, I think we're going to be able to reach many more of those. It's in the paper often about athletes that really need to have help with, learning to read, to be educated. And we have great success there. We've worked with Sound Mind, Sound Body. I know ROTC programs, you have kids in high school preparing for military, but if they can't read, they can't even live through that. Our jails are full of the illiterate. So I think by knowing that we've worked with those farthest behind, that yes, everyone is capable of reading better, and having this extended access to be able to do this one-on-one work online really opens the door to extended communities. And I guess I'll finish with this. This problem, we have people who can't read around us in every area of society. And we need to spark a movement. And people that are have people showing up who are illiterate to their doors. They need to embrace these solutions, and they need to meet people where they are. And I think if all of us met people right where they were showing up already and gave them the intensive intervention they needed, we could look back on this problem in a number of years, whether that's 5 years or 10 years or whatever. But they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Our homes, our churches, our schools, our jails, our juvenile centers, our sports, our bridge programs to universities. They need to learn to read, and they can in a very short period of time.
And we need to remove the shame from all that. I mean, that's the biggest problem. It seems like there's this magical line in third grade that once that happens, nobody talks about Fight Club anymore. It's like you can't talk about it anymore. And it seems like kids just start to slink further and further back, and they hide more and more and more. They create coping mechanisms and other things, and there's no safe way to say, hey, I don't understand this still. And so and then obviously we need to do that for adults too. We just need to remove the shame, because it's interesting that the reading system we're using, I mean, it works for a percentage of people. It's not as high as we need it to be, but it works for a percentage of people. And so what I really hope, and the only reason I'm making this film is because, again, I'm with you, Ken. At the Reading Wars, actually, the more I talk to people on both sides, they all want the same thing. There's nobody who says, I don't want kids to read. They all want the same thing. It's the political parties of the two sides that battle, which really, is silliness. But at the end of the day, I just want parents of children who are struggling readers to know, hey, if what you're getting in school isn't working, there's a different way. And I want adults to know that, hey, if you didn't learn, you're not broken. There's another way. And if we could get that across, and if we could make those other ways of tutoring affordable and coaching affordable, would be amazing. And obviously, Pamela, the work you're doing is incredible in that realm. And then I do think there needs to be systemic change. It needs to happen. But I mean, the education system it's not just reading. That's the problem with the education system. There's a lot, right? So I think, again, like you said, Ken, I think, it's our responsibility to step in. It's our responsibility to meet people where they're at, Pamela. And I think there are a lot of, Pamela, we've talked a lot about individual assessments of children, and, rather than just standardized testing, we need to stop and take the time to individually assess these kids. Unfortunately, we all know there's school districts where some kids will never, ever get a certified teacher, which is unbelievable. Like, that's mind blowing, right? And then number two, when you've got, some classes overpopulated with, 38 ducklings, I mean, it's almost impossible to get the time to assess these kids. So, I mean, there's a lot of systemic issues here. And what it seems to me, people who are willing to step in and fight are always the ones who make change. And we're seeing that as, I've interviewed parents, parents who didn't know anything about this until their kid couldn't read. And then they started a movement, right? I've seen people all over the place, and it's probably no different than anything else, but people are the ones who make the difference and can make the difference. And so, I don't know what it's going to take to change the system, but I hope parents, teachers, others are encouraged that no, you can be the one who makes a difference by learning, volunteering and stepping up and trying to figure out which of those children are struggling. And they may not be willing to say it. But I think, I don't know, there's a lot there, but it's a tough one.
Pam, I did want to go back. You say you guys come into the schools and it takes, 6 to 10 weeks and you get these kids reading. I mean, what do you chalk up your success to? What is it that you all are able to do as an outside organization coming in that is not happening in schools?
Well, the individualized assessment is key. You have to know how far a child's behind. So if you end up being advanced, proficient, or below proficiency, and that below proficiency for a high school kid could mean a half grade level behind or 8 grade levels behind. You have to know how far behind a student is to be able to really address it. And as they're older, they speak, right? They speak. We assume that they can read and write. And so the assessment is key. But also kids that are more than a grade level behind, they really need an individualized curriculum in a way that the curriculum is rolled out to meet their needs. And to do that one-on-one tutoring is key. And I believe, our team believes that it's an hour a day, 5 days a week for the duration of their prescription. That's what drives quick results. Many of the programs that get rolled out, because whether the teachers are delivering them during the school day to next point, they have all these kids, you're reading once a week, 20 minutes with a kid all year. Well, that doesn't move the needle as rapidly. And it doesn't really work for the kids because they don't feel like they're learning. And so it is really those two pieces, that relationship. Well, I guess it's 3, the assessment, the curriculum, and the intensive one-on-one tutoring that really makes a difference. And I'd like to just comment on the shame aspect that Nick was talking about, and also that Ken mentioned it in a way, that I think because this hasn't been addressed in decades, that people believe when they can't read, they don't know that they can't read and they need to learn to read. They just feel like they don't get something. It makes them feel stupid in a way, that they're not able to just hear and do what you're asked. And in some communities, we have generations of going to school, and education has not benefited them. They have not been able to reap the rewards of being educated and getting jobs and pursuing their lives. And so if you're a child that has gone through a system and left not able, and you have children, then you also believe that something's different. As soon as we get, especially high school kids, because they know they don't get something, as soon, I say, maybe the first week, 2, they're pushing back because they're not expecting this to work, right? But as soon as they see that they look at letters that form words, that this is helping them, they are all in. And they're not only all in for themselves, they're all in for their families. Now they believe everybody can, that it's something that you can just go get. And the more we can roll this out in the schools, I think, because that's where kids are showing up, and they can see that everyone can read better. You may be a reader, but you can read 2 grade levels above. You may not be able to read, and it's just a process that they will start believing in themselves, they'll believe in their families, they'll believe in each other. And so, we think the quickest way to show this is to partner with schools, get kids reading, because really we're all expecting that kids learn to read there. Right now, there's an epidemic, so they need partners to come in and, if I can use the word, flatten the curve. But really, the model does need to change so that the curve doesn't start building up on us again.
Ken, I've heard you talk a bit about mindsets and how important they are. I'm wondering if you can tell us sort of how mindsets, the mindset of an individual teacher or a parent or just school staff member really, or even a child, really play a role in determining whether or not kids learn how to read.
So, I've spent the past 14 years consulting with schools, helping them build learning for all cultures. And what we're great at, and I think this is just part of human nature, we're great at the what of the work, the templates, the next steps, the process. Often I hear people like, let's get to the meat. But what I've learned is that this work is 50% mindset and 50% execution. And I've seen a template look like busy work, stuff you're doing for the man, stuff you're doing out of compliance when you don't have the right mindset behind it. And that same template, working with people with the right mindset, it is a godsend. Like, I too have indomitable spirit, but I'm not an expert in literacy. But if I work with you guys, I have the mindset. Like, if I develop that passion for making literacy happen, I posted a video. I post videos all the time, and one of them is called, I am the difference. And this is the truth. I was never the greatest teacher at anything, but I walked into the profession not wondering if I could make a difference. I thought I was the difference. I thought I was a difference. And part of knowing that I am the difference means when I look up and realize I haven't reached every child the way I need to, then I just look to my left and my right, and I've got teammate Pamela, teammate Nick, right? And then we become a collaborative team. Forget it. So the mindset has to be there. And this is not a book promotion, but that's the impetus behind the title of Ruthless Equity, to provide equity to all students. And I define equity. It's not race-based. It's not culture-based. Those issues may have brought equity to the surface, but I define equity as in a culture of belonging and inclusion, right? Providing students what they need when they need it with urgency to master essential learning outcomes. Mm-hmm. To provide that kind of equity, you've got to have a mindset that is able to navigate all the negatives coming at you. I use the word ruthless in this context. To be excellent at anything, you can't give your time, attention, and focus to everything. And when I think about Olympic athletes and how they prepare, they are ruthless about the things that matter and equally ruthless about the things they have to cut away. And we've got to cut away the bell-shaped curve. We got to cut away the idea that intelligence is based on the hue of someone's skin. We've got to cut away othering people, like looking past them. We got to cut away this subconscious feeling that Spanish is somehow a disability. We got to cut away the idea that poverty means, kids aren't able to learn. We got to cut away those things, treat them as context, right? And leverage that mindset along with the tools. Like, mindset alone is not enough. Tools alone aren't enough. You need both of them to create that explosion. And I know I keep referring to Rebecca because this is kind of how I started. But when she talked about how she could teach anyone to read, like, it sent a chill down my spine. It's just one of those moments where I don't know how she's going to do it, but I believe her. Like, I put my money on, I would put my money on that kind of conviction. And she, for me, was the embodiment of both mindset and practice. So it's critically important.
I think Rebecca is on this call. Is that true?
Is she really?
Yeah, I believe I saw her name.
She didn't pay me, I promise you.
So
Nick,
we're glad she told you that, Ken.
She's a monster,
very
man.
glad she
Rebecca,
told you.
I'm telling you, she got that look in her eye, and it's just like, what? I believe you. Tell me what you need, and I'll get out of your way.
Nick, you're calling your film The Truth About Reading. I mean, what are the misconceptions that you want to clear up, and what's that truth that you're referring to in your title there?
Well, I mean, the more I get into it, the more I learn that the truth is complicated, and that's why this is an issue. I mean, I think, to me, the truth about reading is that that the two sides of the the reading wars are not as far apart as I think the world would try to make you believe. I think the truth about reading is that there are methods that can teach anyone how to read. And I guess that's probably the most important thing. And again, if you're not getting what you need where you're at, there are other solutions. Now, it becomes really difficult if you don't have, if you've got a single parent at home who doesn't have the time to look for other solutions because they're just trying to, work multiple jobs to pay rent or, so there are things there are outside factors. However, like Ken said, at the end of the day, I think the one thing we can count on is that we know a kid is going to be, other than truancy, which is dealt with other ways, we know where kids are going to be certain parts of the day, right? They should be with their teachers, and those teachers are the frontline support. So I don't know exactly what it takes to get every teacher the tools they need. But very clearly, there are many teachers who don't have the tools they need. And it seems on every level that when someone cares about it, it gets fixed. I don't know how to make everyone care about it. And it doesn't make sense to me that everyone wouldn't care about it. So, part of this is just super, I don't get it. It's really like there's no one that you talk to doesn't care about it. But, I haven't interviewed every teacher at every school. And I'm sure there are some teachers who are just phoning it in. There has to be, just statistically, right? But it's just, it's so frustrating. But again, people who want to make a difference can make a difference, and it can start anywhere. I've seen a principal who turned their whole school around. It's because leadership from the top helped. I've seen teachers who are going against the will of their principals at their school because they're using something that's working, and the principals or the superintendent saying you can't use that system. They're doing it anyway. So people make the difference, look. I've worked with Tony Robbins. I've worked with a bunch of, and he's probably the best mindset coach in the world, right? And it is mindset. It's mindset, but then also having the tools and the preparation to be able to do the work you need to do.
That's right. And that's I'm sorry. And again, Nick kind of opened the door, so I'm going to jump on that bandwagon a little bit because I don't like to speak out of ignorance, and I've not explored these wars, but some of it feels territorial. I don't know. That mindset is so important. I make the case, and I talk about this with my audiences all the time. We've made Carol Dweck, the author of Mindset, which is a phenomenal book. We've made her a millionaire 10 times over. We know her work better than she does. We're at her keynotes in the front row, and she says, there's a graph on page 60. No, girl, it's on page 63. We know her work better than she does. We got the posters everywhere. And yet we still revert back to fixed mindset, which believes that you are born, you either have it or you don't. And so I don't even like to use the word ability. I like performance. Performance can be improved. And the people Nick is talking about, the folks who want to and believe they can, a part of it is just believing you can. It's so wrapped up. I've worked in some of those same schools where, depending on where they are in the community, they've decided on this narrative. We are these kids. If you follow my work, I call them that school. And we just let history just play out. The biggest challenge with our work is that you're going to find what you look for. That's the thing. You call kids dumb, you dumb them down all day, you keep creating low groups and teaching kids below grade level all year long. They're going to produce in kind, and then your decisions will be justified. That's the rub of our work. If you do the opposite, hold a crown above kids' head, challenge them to grow tall enough to wear it, provide opportunities to extend and enrich, press coal to create diamonds, and look for the gifts and strengths of every child, you're going to find that as well. That's the rub of our work. That's the frustrating part, is human beings are going to deliver, what gets hammered into us most.
If I could comment, I think the shocking truth about reading, and that hopefully this panel discussion today, this film, these books, everyone's interventions around the nation. The shocking truth about reading is America is dramatically failing to teach its people to read and write. To read and write. You have other countries that not only teach their language, kids how to read and write their own language, which is Spanish or German or French or whatever it is. They're also teaching how to read and write English. America believes it's being done. It is not. And more of the population is becoming illiterate. And that's shocking truth. We need a mindset change around that issue, that we as Americans are not teaching our people to read and write, and they're falling out of what many believe still to this day, that you can pursue your dreams. You really can't if you can't read and write.
No question.
And so these conversations, I hope, help spur people on and wake this nation up, because there are solutions. I agree with Rebecca. There isn't anyone that you can't help. And we need to be giving them what they need and letting them get on with their lives. So,
well, I want to kind of go back. We've talked a lot about one-on-one instruction tutoring, how, that does move the needle, and there's research behind that, knowing, as Nick said, there is a type of reading instruction that will meet everybody's needs. And, a lot of the reading instruction that's happening in schools is meeting some kids' needs. But we have teachers, 3 million teachers around the country working so hard, right? They're working so hard. And yet a lot of kids still are slipping through the cracks. So, I just I want to stay here, what are schools and educators and teachers supposed to do about this problem? If we know one-on-one instruction, one-on-one diagnostics are incredibly important, and the research backs that. And yet, as Nick said, we got 38 ducklings in a kindergarten class over here. How do we make the math work? And how do we help our teachers get to a place where every student can learn with the instruction that they're using?
Well, it goes back to we have to flatten the curve. I'm sorry, Nick, but we have to flatten the curve. If you have 35 out of 38 ducklings in your class that need intensive one-on-one, the teacher can't do that. It's not humanly possible. So we have put way more responsibility on teachers than they're actually able to perform. I mean, the educational model was designed to take a third grader and prepare them for fourth grade. It wasn't designed that wherever they show up, you shore up, 3, 4, 5 grade levels. And so we have to look at this, that this hasn't been addressed in decades. Our schools are full of illiterate kids. You have to send partners in to help get kids, even if you said 4th through 12th grade, you get partners to help get those kids reading, and then educators focus on the early years. However you want to divide it up, but they need help. This is a crisis. This isn't a normal day. And, I think they're the heroes on the front lines trying to catch everything that society has thrown at them in terms of kids. And unfortunately, you have people making decisions that aren't giving them what they need, nor really making sure that they're able to accomplish it. So once we send literate kids who've been cared for, when they're not in school, into a class, you can start measuring the curriculum and you can measure the teachers. And until then, you really can't, because it's a crisis day.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and I don't have an answer for this. And I'm not saying that your firm addresses this as well. I get the partnership and the intervention part, but I want to figure out how we can bring, how we can improve things on the front end. I'm in my 50s now, but in my early 20s, my parents did a great job, but we lived check to almost check. We always had more month than the money. So I wasn't super financially literate in my young adult years. And, I'd get myself in trouble, and then the partner would come in, a debt consolidation loan. It would simplify things. I'd pay it off, but then I'd look around, and a year and a half later, I'd be back in debt, another consolidation loan. It wasn't until I learned how money works that I was able to flatten that curve completely. So there's got to be things that are done, that support teachers at the tier 1 stage, so that we don't have these continued waves of students who need the intervention. But I get exactly what you're saying, Pamela. We need, this is 911 right now.
Well,
I just want to know how we can simultaneously address the crisis and support our teachers in a way that we can flatten, because that's what I do with schools. When I work with high schools and they have, waves of kids who are working below grade level, we start early, vertically. And it's an effort to have that next wave not crest so high, but that requires that, intervening with the troops, with the folks with boots on the ground, our teachers.
Well, there are issues that got us here. Those need to be changed. So it's flattening the curve is a simultaneous phase 1, while the system itself is changing. The universities have to start teaching teachers how to teach reading. They have to learn the intensive process, as well as some kids don't need that intensive process. They need that. We need to go back to an intensive one-on-one assessment, at least at 3rd, 5th, 9th, at these catch points where kids can get stuck in terms of learning to read better. So the system has to be changed so it doesn't keep pumping, making or carrying on illiterate kids. I think it's important to note too that this crisis, we have illiterate kids in every school district in America. Our highest achieving in Oakland County pre-pandemic had 21%, and now they're at 30%. So this isn't just a vulnerable community issue. This is everywhere, and kids can't read for a variety of reasons. I mean, the main word they use, dyslexia, but English language learners, autism, ADHD, these are kids who are capable and they need a program rolled out that they can latch on to. And so flattening the curve, changing the system, both of those have to happen in order for this not to carry on. I agree with you. Yep.
Nick.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe there is, but I don't know that I've seen people claim that there is a method that will work for everyone. So I just want to make sure I don't know if there's been enough research done that says this system will work for everyone. Seems to be everyone can be helped, and there are and people who the current system isn't working for. There seems to be something that does seem to work for most everybody else. The other thing I think is just really, really tough is, I mean, excuse me, we've really increased, ratcheted up what we expect from kids in school. Everything from the public university system on down. I mean, it's almost impossible to get into a lot of universities now. So I got a 17-year-old son who's does he need to take 4 AP classes or 5 AP classes? And it's just like this, and without encouragement and mindset at home, people can get lost in this mentality. And I think it's just, I know a lot of people who there wasn't even a kindergarten when they went to school. They started at 1st grade, and kids mature at different ages. So it's really silly to put this this 3rd grade, this is the time. I mean, some kids, look, some teachers were probably partying a little too hard the night before they went to college to learn how to teach reading. I just didn't get that lesson that day. I mean, we've all been guilty of those types of things. So there's got to be some remedial training. There's got to be some continuing education requirements, things like that. And then there's also, some kids just, if a kid's dad dies, in a car accident, their 2nd or 3rd grade year, you can't really expect them to be able to focus the way they would have been able to if that didn't happen. So I think in a lot of cases too, we put these, we do need to assess our kids. Clearly we do need to get them what they need. But this construct of a kid by the age of, 9 must be able to be efficient and proficient and fluent in these things. It's just not going to happen for every kid at the age of 9. I mean, I remember my middle son getting a call from the 2nd grade teacher who was very concerned that he wouldn't sit still in story time for 30 minutes. I'm like, he's like, he's a 7-year-old boy. I can't sit still in story time for 30 minutes. So, I mean, there's a lot of complexities to this. And in a lot of cases, we also need to leave room for kids to mature as well. But again, a lot of this is talking about individual instruction. And that's a really important thing. And with the technology we have now, I mean, there's no excuse for not being able to do that, but it just, in a lot of cases, just doesn't fit into the current methodologies of the way the public school system works. And that's just that's a whole other can of worms, right? But again, I think my point being, in a lot of cases, kids need time to mature, and kids are going to, popcorn kernels pop at different times in the microwave, right? Right. And so, my wife used that analogy the other day and made fun of her, so I guess I need to apologize. But it happens, and we need to leave room for that, right? And so I think that's important too.
I want to move into questions from the audience in a moment here, so please start putting those in there, and we'll get to as many as we can. But I just do want to talk about equity for a moment. We know that Black and Hispanic students score significantly lower on, for instance, the NAEP reading test, which is, the nation's report card, as I was talking about earlier. So we know that, 18% of Black students and 23% of Hispanic students were at or above proficient in 2019. and it was just 44% of white students, and that was for fourth graders. And these performance gaps have stayed steady for about 30 years since we've been measuring them. So how can educators and policymakers really start to address equity here and making sure that all kids get what they need, and how can we begin to reduce these gaps and give all students appropriate instruction, rigorous instruction? I'll let anybody jump in there.
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, it's definitely a complex issue. I've worked with every type of school across North America, a couple thousand schools over 14 years, urban, suburban, rural, extra rural, doesn't matter. And if I ask the audience, what are the 5 quote unquote, groups that persistently underperform, it's the same 5 groups every time, right? Poor white kids, poor black kids, poor brown kids, kids that don't speak the King's English, kids with identify with special needs. So either, and I had a colleague post this question to an audience, either we decided as a nation that the kids that fall into those groups are genetically predisposed to lower levels of intelligence, or we have to come to terms with the fact that we have a subconscious sliding scale of expectations. And we know the former isn't true. We right? You peel us all back, we're all the same. We know the former isn't true. So again, we're back to mindset. That's one. The other piece of that is equitable practice, right? So again, issues of underperformance in Black and Hispanic communities have brought equity to the surface, but equity is not a race-based issue. Equity is equity. And equitable practice is rooted in what's essential. And so I use this example all the time. If we decide that every fourth grader's got to know how to make this remote that's got 6 carry to 1, 8 buttons, right? Because this remote's going to help them progress at the next grade level, the next course, the high stakes assessment where applicable, and life beyond the K-12 system. We've deemed this essential. That means we've got to organize to ensure every fourth grader walks out knowing how to make this remote. That means there is no more can they or can't they. That means the fact that he comes from a poor side of town is now context and not an excuse. And what that's going to do is going to place you in front of a mirror and really challenge our biases. So we try to attack this stuff out of nowhere, and we drop it on teachers like an anvil. But when we look up and we see patterns based on the fact that this is essential now, and what this does, once you identify what's essential, it takes the burden of trying to figure out who can and who can't off the table. There is no who can and who can't. There's only how will we get them there. Now, this remote has like 34 buttons. This one's not required for every fourth grader, but some fourth graders will aspire to achieve this. We should offer this to all kids, and those who are ready and want to go after it is fine. But we've got to make sure every single kid has this one. And this is what's part of what's lacking in schools, the identification of what's essential and then treating them like they're essential. That's the key. What's essential is the what, but then there's a mindset to what's essential. There's a mindset to it. And it's no different than putting your back to the wall and deciding the only way out is that way. It's no different. There's a, and that's not a great term, there's a going for itness to essential work. Because you're fighting all the stuff in your head. I know Nick, I had Nick's brothers. I know Nick doesn't have a whole lot of support at home. And, Pamela comes from a tough side of town. You got all those things fighting you that make you want to diminish this or dumb it down or create another low group. But we get more equity. We get more results out of equity when we establish what's essential. And for the best literacy and reading teachers and reading specialists I've known, they have essentials. The best ones, they have essentials. I know I'm about to like knight Rebecca, but I mean, I'm just telling you the way she was talking to me, she was like, here's where they need to be, and they're going to get there. And I'm just, and we need more people like that. We need more mindset like that, but it's got to start with the what. What is essential? Because if you don't have this, then you're left to try to judge. I call it wearing a backpack of boulders, right? The pressure of judgment, trying to figure out a kid's potential. That's not our business. Highest individual potential is not our business. Our business is to figure out what every student needs to be successful at the next level and how we're going to organize to get them there, to grow them to this, grow them to the crown. Start with the crown. I'm gonna
go into audience questions from there. I have to say, I do love an answer with a visual component. Thank you for that, Ken. That was fantastic. I'll be thinking about those remotes later. So we got a question here looks like from Jennifer. How can we spearhead an Operation Warp Speed for literacy? It feels as though we need to find a way to coalesce our individual efforts to effectively address this crisis once and for all. It's a big question.
Can you say it again?
Sure. How can we spearhead an Operation Warp Speed for literacy? Feels though we need to find a way to coalesce our individual efforts to effectively address the crisis.
Well, I'll go ahead and comment. I don't know if the other gentlemen want to follow up, but solutions. I mean, we love solutions, right? One of the good things about this crisis is that we have people showing up to society's doors already. We have children showing up. We have illiterate children showing up for 12 or 13 years to be educated. So we have an access point. If we can, I think one of the other things that really stands in the way at this point when we have this crisis is the funding for it. And everyone just thinks that it's a lot of funding. Like, how do you pair every child and the cost of all of that? It gets in the way. We need to look at this as dire need, and we need to go and do it as well as we can and as fast as we can, regardless of what it costs. And so because the education has become a government function, right? They roll from these budgets, it really drives everything. And there's some things about each of us human beings that are more important than that budget. That doesn't say to not be fiscally responsible, but it's to say, these are the kids that need help. And okay, here's the budget. We got to go find a way anyway. And to change that mindset, that that's not an excuse any longer, would really help. To say, okay, this is what the state can do. We need everybody to help because we have all these kids being educated right now that need to learn to read. And so, it's mind-boggling. I love this mindset change. It's mind-boggling that in America we could have this problem, but it's also being able to catch people where they are. If you just let teachers know what they know already, they know that their kids need help. And if they're given systems of being able to do it, I mean, much of this work can happen through the schools. Those that have 90% of their population illiterate, they're going to need some partners trained for a while. But we have access points, and we should be giving every child at a minimum who shows up to school, we should be giving them one-on-one instruction and an assessment to know that we're doing our best for them. And then the ripple effects of that are huge. And we need to go to those other societal touch points where we know we have illiterate people. And it's the homeless, it's those in jails, it's in our communities in different places. So it's time to get going. Let's just look for solutions.
Anyone else want to? All right, I have another question here. I believe it's from Janine. Can you share what kind of approach you use at Beyond Basics in a one-on-one session? What is the approach that you use, and do you see better results in person or virtual? Is there a difference there?
Pretty much the in-person and the virtual were on par. If they were delivered to like 5th and above, some of the young ones, the online didn't work as well as in person. It was hard to keep their attention. But in terms of our curriculum, I would say that, you have this blended learning, you have the whole language and the intensive science of reading, multisensory phonics space, teaching kids how to decode. Because we have an individualized platform, we use any and all of that, but kids that are behind more than a grade level really do get that intensive one-on-one. They're not getting the blended learning approach or just the whole language approach. So, to your point, Nick, you've probably gone crazy because depending on who you're working for, that any of those curriculums work. What we have to do is start prescribing what someone needs after a diagnostic. And so we use all of it. Most of the kids that we work with, we've embedded ourselves in in school communities that have the majority of their kids needing the intensive. So that's mostly what we do. But depending on the child in front of you, any of it can work. And we use any of those resources.
I have a question here from Karen. What do each of the panelists think about getting back to the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic from K-8? By this, it means significantly reducing other core classes such as history, social studies, etc. Do you think this is a realistic methodology for our schools?
I believe in K-5 that may be a really, we see kind of another stop point at that 5th, 6th grade level, where you may read as a 3rd grader, but you get stuck at 5th or 6th grade. So maybe even K-7, and I don't know if all just reading, writing, arithmetic, but it should be the majority of the coursework. That would be one way to solve this problem. Once you do solve it and you flatten the curve and you change this instruction, you may be able to go back to more of these other curriculums. But it's such an epidemic right now that in some school districts, that may be the best way to go.
I don't know. I'm funny about that. At least the way the question hits my ears, it almost implies that, time alone is the issue. And I just, like I see schools that will, extend their school day by 3 hours as if time is the only issue. We change nothing else. We just add 3 more hours of what already hasn't been working during the day.
Yes, that's right.
I think it's more than time. I can't think of a curricular area that does involve some form of reading, writing, or arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I don't know all the specifics of the program. I think so much of it is mindset. Even the issues of funding. I don't know. I'm relatively apolitical. I just don't have patience for it. But what I do find is that price is only an issue in the absence of value. And we as human beings, we find a way to do stuff when we believe we want to do it. I don't know, this country's able to, seems like just like print money when we deem the issues important enough. And so.
Well, we blame in this issue, Ken.
Yeah.
That gets in the way of helping. We agree it needs to be done, but we're blaming someone else. And the fact that people blame the educators is not helping anyone.
No, it's not.
We need to get past that. And this is a much broader conversation than education. But I do think there are many ways to solve it. And, focusing more on reading and writing in the early years may be one way to do it. But if you're going to use the same old method, which is lightweight for everybody, that's not going to work either. So it's going to have to be an intensive intervention for a majority of the kids.
Yeah, I would just want the intensive to be, engaging, and I don't know anything about it. I just,
well,
I know what that triggers, but I know that's not you. But
6 weeks, Ken. It's just 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, we're running up on the end of our hour here. So I'm going to close it out. I just wanted to say thank you to Beyond Basics, the John Corcoran Foundation, and Evidence-Based Literacy Instruction. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. That was such a nice discussion. To everyone here in our virtual audience for your participation. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. The hour went quickly. So, but I really appreciate this conversation. Just so you know, a recording of this panel will be available soon after the event. And I just want to thank everyone for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.